we had planned. This is my bro love,
Chris McDonald Dennis.
and we are so happy to be back. We had a really nice long break. I was moving. Chris had things going on, but we're back. So now I'm recording somewhere in Michigan, near Detroit. And Chris is...
I am in the middle of nowhere, Massachusetts, Northwest Massachusetts, North Adams to be exact. And living rurally.
Yes. So first of all, let us be noting that Chris and I did not plan the outfits.
No, it just weird. When we got on the call, we were like, oh, okay.
Yeah. That was, yeah. Eventually it was going to happen, everybody, because this is how Chris and I roll.
We do.
But yeah, this we were not like, everybody dressed in blue. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, no. So all love, but no, this is not what happened. So a lot has happened since we last were on the podcast. So much has happened. But what we're going to address today on the podcast is aging and ageism.
Yes, as early 50 folks, we are dealing with this. And, we just wanted to, and this will probably be a multi-podcast, multi-episode conversation, because there are so many different ways that we can go about it. And I think in many ways, part of our desire to start this podcast was because of ageism that we had been dealing with in aging, and where was our voice in conversations, and this idea that we didn't have anything left to, I don't want to say anything left to say, because, the joke about Gen X is no one's ever asked our opinion anyway.
Right, exactly.
But it just got really kind of annoying. Like, okay, but for me, I think the ageism part was, that's missing from the conversation about, like, the generational wars.
Yes.
That's also ageism.
Yep. Bingo.
And it also can be youth oppression from, like, older folks. But, like, for us, like, it also can be rooted in this ageism youth obsession that we have. For me, as a gay man, I am very much attuned to that in my community. But, so it's like, how do we say that generational wars, first of all, why do we call them wars? Like, that just seems a little violent. But also, they're not just innocent.
Right.
Because we are all located in systems of oppression. So.
Right.
Yeah.
And I also think the thing is, we've all been a certain age. If we're talking about the younger generation, it's like younger generation, we've all been 20. We've all been your age. We've been your age in different circumstances. Like in our generation, we grew up with the specter of nuclear war. Speaking kind of addressing what's going on right now in the world with Ukraine and Putin and the threat of nuclear strikes. So we grew up on that. So it was like, yeah, okay. I remember this feeling. I think I still remember how to stop, drop, and roll, get under my desk, all of that. Not that not getting on your desk would help. Once we sat down, we thought about what those things meant, but that's how we dealt with it. Right. We had, what was it called? The Day After. Wasn't that movie?
Oh, sis, it's so funny that you say that. So I'm part of this, like, righteous memes of Gen X, which that's a ridiculous group because, for many reasons. But it's but folks are talking about, like, there are two things they mentioned. One, the day after, like, remember, that scared the crap out of us. I mean, I remember, like, saying to myself, I hope that I'm near a target, because it was like, then you would just be incinerated right away. But if you were farther away, then you were going to have to live with it was going to take you a long time to die.
Yes.
So that people have been talking about that. And do you remember that movie Red Dawn?
Oh my God.
When the Soviet Union and all these white kids. Now I didn't realize it was like Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Grey was in it and stuff like that. So it's like been joking that like we're ready for this. But well, Ian, remember, one of the things that's been really scary for me is seeing what's happening with Chernobyl. Like you and I were 17 when that happened. I have friends who were raised in the Soviet Union who literally who grew up not even in Ukraine, but like they had to like move them because they were so concerned about the radioactive fallout because of Ukraine. So it's like this stuff is in our memories. Like I remember how scary, because that was even worse than what was it called? Was it called Love Connect? What was that? Do you remember?
3 Mile Island.
3 Mile Island in like 1979. Remember that was in New York. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, like for us, nuclear war and nuclear accidents, that was like a daily thing.
Right. It's like nuclear. Okay. It was our vocabulary. It was like one of the, our vocabulary, nuclear war, nuclear tests, nuclear plants. Detroit, I'm near a nuclear plant. So it's like, we don't want to.
Remember microwaves? People were afraid because they were like, oh, it's nuclear. And people were like, my mom wouldn't use it. And was like, I'm good. And I was like,
it's radiation.
Yes,
and I still have that thing. I'm like, low key, I don't like still using them, but it's a different kind of radiation. And but because that technology was so new, it's like radiation is radiation is radiation. And we didn't differentiate what all of those were. So yeah, your mom would have been afraid. All of that. Yeah, I remember all of that.
Ian, remember, you and I were born literally 24 years after we dropped 2 nuclear bombs. Like, and we saw what happened in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. I mean, we saw that.
And also, we were brought to the brink of war with the Bay of Pigs.
Right before we were born, 7 years before we were born. I mean, it was literally, and you and I were born in, and we grew up in the, I would say in the shadow of this movement to stop that nuclear weapons, and it was like people were really trying to say like, no one will win this.
Right.
No one will. I mean, do you remember the movie War Games? You remember and remember that they were playing tic-tac-toe because it was, and for those of you who may not remember, it was Matthew Broderick, and first he got into like the whatever that the government, the militaries,
I think he got into the Pentagon or
the Pentagon's, and thought it was a war, and he thought it was a war game.
Literally,
so he started almost like a nuclear war. But then what they did was it was like tic-tac-toe, and basically it was like, you can't win this.
Right.
And I just remember being like, that was just the knowledge that you and I grew up with. Like this, we can't win it. Like it's dumb. Like, and they tried to say, oh well, that was. But also remember that we were also raised on this rationality. Remember that it was that we were assumed that it was rational beings who knew, well, you have it and I have it, so no one's going to use it.
I think isn't that the basis of is it SALT or START?
Yeah, I think so. You're right. I think
it's mutual, what they call it, mutually assured destruction.
Exactly, it's like, and that when what got scared was when non-state actors got it. Like, so when terrorists, what would happen if a terrorist got it?
Right.
And that's why we're so scared with Kim Jong-il. Because
Jong-un,
thank you. Because he's not rational.
Right, he's not rational, but also he's not part of the agreement.
Yes.
Remember, that was between Russia and the back then USSR, Soviet Union, and the United States. That was the agreement. Everybody else just kind of fall back. Yeah. That's how that was. So now with the collapse of the Soviet Union, now Russia, it's like everybody else started getting into the action. It's like, wait a minute, wait, hold it. Everybody, there's too many nuclear wars, too many people not part of the agreement. So what? So now that's what the agitation is like. Now what are we dealing with? I mean, we've got we're not dealing with the Soviet Union. We're dealing with someone who wants to go back to the Soviet Union, and doing it in this way that seems really chaotic. And then we have this other chaos of everybody else having a nuclear warhead and being able to develop nuclear technology. So yeah, we're all kind of like, But the idea of even having the phrase mutually assured destruction in our vocabulary, like to be able to call that forth, like, yes, that's the generational aspect of that.
Yep.
And also the idea of, we don't want no nukes. I remember that distinctly. That was a holdover from anti-war in the 60s, but very much into the 70s and 80s. In our generation, it was like no nuclear war. We were adamant, no nukes, no nukes, no nukes.
Yep. And I also remember that it was, because this was also different. I mean, there was Ronald Reagan, but I remember it was more bipartisan then too, because there were Republicans who were like, I'll die too.
Yes, the Republicans that we are seeing now were people that were still they were around with Reagan. And back then, you were like, we weren't trying to fool with Putin. Putin was, what do you mean we're talking to the Soviet Union? Are you serious? That would have been verboten. You did not talk to the Soviet Union. And let alone have a whole part of America caping for.
I want younger generations to understand how mind-blowing that is for you and I to see the Republican, to see what Trump has done. Because for you and I to see the GOP going full pro-Russia, that literally has been the most mind-blowing thing, because it's like, because they were the ones who were like, we were the peace, we were the doves, and we were the ones who they would say, like, you don't care about America because you want to go talk to them. And it's like, now, I mean, when Tucker Carlson started saying all that ridiculous stuff, I was like, wow. And it was, seeing the white supremacy in the Republican Party didn't surprise me. No. Everything, I must admit, Andrea, that shook me to my core in a way I didn't believe, because, and I so appreciate this conversation, because I didn't realize that was such a foundational thing that you and I grew up with, that Republicans were patriots. Sometimes they were isolationists, but they were always going to care about our national security so much, and
almost too much,
and how they viewed that was a little bit myopic. But there was something.
You still felt like whatever else they were about in their conservatism,
they cared about us.
They cared about, and they weren't going to cross that line. They would absolutely lay their souls down back in the 80s if they were talking about Vladimir Putin.
No, thank you.
So this 180 from that, these very hawkish, they were almost viciously anti-Russia, anti-Soviet Union, shall we say?
Yeah.
And we as Democrats were screaming, and we as liberal progressives were screaming, y'all are getting us to the nuclear war. Y'all keep wanting to hawk war, and it's specifically nuclear war. When nuclear war became a thing, it's like, and you're trying to get us to this point. It's like, no nukes. That's where all of that was that generation. So to turn around and be like, we're talking about Vladimir Putin as a positive.
Yeah.
What is going on?
Because we were the ones who were like, you need to talk to your enemies. You have to talk to your enemies. And they were like, and we were like, well, okay, well, they're still your enemies. Like, what's the big deal to talk to them?
Right. It's like, but not like this. When we mean talk to your enemies, we mean to negotiate. So there is a peace. It's not and hopefully, and ultimately aiming towards a peace, like MLK was talking about, a peace, not just an absence of tension, but justice. That's what we were going for, not turn around and be like, oh, hey, Putin, we're buddies.
Well, it shows the authoritarianism. This is about.
But let's be clear about what that authoritarian is. Very white supremacist. Authoritarian.
Without a doubt. It is white supremacist. Yes.
Because note that, and my mom had to tell me this, was the reason why America is not going to go after Russia is because America still sees Russia as a fellow white people. So they are not, so they're going to do the sanctions. They're not going to actually, my mom said they would never have gone, she says, honestly, we would not have gone to war. It was scary, but they honestly wouldn't have done, because it's white people and white people. They're not going to destroy that much of that particular population. America won't. Now, Russia doesn't think that way. They don't have that same, there's not that same rootedness in white supremacy, but America will never touch them.
See,
they just won't.
I am going to have to gently disagree with you, Mom. Well, because what was World War I and World War II then? I mean, they went to Europe and
they did but remember, we didn't go into World War II until Japan came after us.
Right, but
and when we went down and when we bombed, we didn't bomb Germany. We bombed Japan. Even though Germany was doing probably far more destructive things on the continent of Europe, but we didn't go after Europe. We flexed on Japan, who were going to surrender anyway. That was the thing about.
But we also weren't in Japan on the grounds like we were in Europe. I mean, people were on the ground. So I think the reason we're not going to attack, honestly, Russia isn't because of the whiteness. It's because of the fact that they have nuclear weapons.
Okay.
And because now I'm not saying the white supremacy, because certainly I think white supremacy has impacted so much of this.
Yes.
Because of how Europe is like, oh, let these people in, because literally they've said it out loud. They are white and they are Christian.
Yep.
Like they have literally said it out loud. I think how many people in this country are taking it seriously in a way that they didn't in other ways. So I think that, but when I'm thinking about like the people, so I agree with your mother, maybe like maybe average people, but when I think of like Biden and like the people up, I'm thinking that it's more because Russia because that could destabilize the world inside. Like it would be like China if we ever, it would destabilize. So I would just wonder if it were another European country, like would we ever do that? Because remember, we broke international law to go into Serbia.
Right.
In 99. You know, and to do that, to like save, you know, and because that's when there was this whack notion about like liberal hawkishness.
Yes.
You know, it's like we can do good at the end of a gun.
Yes.
And like Samantha Powers was in it, Bill Clinton was in it and stuff like that. And they were like, oh, we can go in and do this and we can go in and do this and stuff like that. And they broke international law and it was like, okay.
Right.
So, but yeah, so.
But to the point of nuclear, though, I think is where that critique comes in at. It's like we won't go nuclear on Russia. We won't. They will. We won't.
Because he's also. Oh. No, Andrea, I was also going to say one of the things that, you know, so I've been reading a lot, and lots of people, lots of Russian analysts who thought that that Putin was rational and calm. They're like, oh, they've realized, no, he is impetuous and he is like, And also the fact that the war is not going as well. I mean, in many ways, one of the things that's been very interesting, Heather Cox Richardson, who is the historian that I love, has actually said Putin doesn't realize that he's actually solidified democracies, because democracies have come together and been like, oh, we're going to stand together.
Yes, whatever else is going on internally, what we do know is we don't want this. And I also think that Trump was a clarion call around that too.
Yes. Yep.
Because remember, those two were peas in a pod. And they still are.
Yes.
As low key as people want to keep it. Those two are peas in a pod. And that's why we're like, why does Trump and Putin, I mean, isn't Putin, it's like, no, they're closer than we thought. That's where we maybe underestimated that situation.
Oh, because it was so new for us again. But I still don't understand, how could we never, like, we know with white supremacy, and we know that, you know, people were loath to do anything. But like, we have a system of, you know, we love to laud our system of laws and checks and balances and blah, blah, blah. They failed us, because why Trump was not arrested for treason, I do not understand. Because what he did
under the jail for treason,
literally, that is the definition. Do you know, Andrea, I have at least 5 friends who were lifelong Republicans. 3 of them, people of color.
Right.
Who left the party after that because they said, you know what? I mean, they were disgusted by Trump anyway. But like, that was like, no, when they saw that there were no Republicans coming out, they were like, no, I do not have a party anymore, because this is textbook treason. And, you know, I kind of like it, because of course I was like, the naivete, you know, like, oh, but they were principled conservatives. They were like, I believed, because they were our age and they had been raised with conservatism, had
small c conservatism.
Yes, had a moral compass. Whether or not you and I accepted that, I think younger people don't understand that we grew up with, even if we disagreed with it, it had a moral compass that we understood.
Yes.
And we could say, I disagree with it, but I had to at least respect it for saying, I get your moral compass. It's just mine's different, but okay.
Right. It wasn't this zero-sum game of it all. That's where I think is different. It's like, we didn't like y'all. We didn't necessarily cancel you. We canceled certain actions because we boycotted like everybody else.
Oh yeah.
But we knew, and we knew that what the conservatives believed in, small c and capital C, was not conducive to having a fair world. That's what we understood, but we also understood it's like, but we dig where you're coming. We understand. We didn't agree, but we understood. I agree with that. This has become, we don't even understand where you're coming from anymore. Beyond this raw, vicious, vile white supremacy. We understood it the entire time, but the way that this has cropped up to the point of, you know, we're going to create laws where, you know, libraries can't have certain books on the shelves, and we're going to go into all. We've always had banned books. Not always. Let me put some historicity on that. We've had banned books in history. We have had groups and people try to go before the courts and say this book needs to be banned, and the court just says, you know what, free speech, free speech, free speech. That's where all that came down to. This is different. This level and the twisting of the language and the vitriol of it all is very, very different.
Yes.
And to the point that, I mean, it's like, yeah, you contested the banned books, but we all didn't go to court and talk about CRT and we're going to jump out in the streets and then we're going to run into the libraries. It was none of that. It was, this particular group didn't like this book in the school. They tried it before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court knocked it down. Okay, ALA has its banned book list. Everybody kind of goes on. It was civil. It was banned books was a civil discussion.
Yep.
Not anymore.
No.
You know, when you're burning books.
Yeah.
We've gone. It's a whole different conversation.
And now, like, you can't say the word gay, and I mean, it's going ridiculous. Ooh. You know, what's interesting is when you were saying about the civil piece and the going back to what small c conservatives when we were young. I remember where you and I would have rolled our eyes at them is we thought that they were naive because we were like, oh, that's nice for like straight white guys.
Right, but we also understood that there's a certain viciousness to it too.
Well, that's also, they need to take responsibility because they're the ones who allowed these people in. They're the ones who said, okay, the moral majority, come in. Let's do that. So even though I may be a moderate Republican, guess what? I'm going to let these people in. So to me, I still also don't feel bad for them because they reaped what they sowed.
Exactly. That you created your own monster.
You did.
Yep. And I think that's where I think, again, having the perspective of age and history and understanding, having that telescope of being able to see it from certain, these different angles and these different lengths of time, we can say, no, this is different. This is a very different beast because we can see the progression, not progressive, but the progression, meaning just, the simple march of time and seeing how and being, being in the midst of the history of thought around all of that. We went from Reagan conservative where you don't treat the Soviet Union like it's your homie. That's not how that is. To, and small c conservative and William F. Buckley, it's not that they were not vicious, nasty white supremacists. They nursed that because we also had the Southern strategy along that was walking, that was in tandem and in the midst of all of that.
Yep.
So we could see that what they were playing with fire when they were playing with white supremacy. And when, and I hate to say this, but when John McCain allowed Sarah Palin to be his running mate, and Steve Schmidt, I think Steve Schmidt I think he's kicking himself to this day. He's like, how did I do that? Why did I do that? When they allowed that level of Tea Party folks, that level of conservatism into the party. Yep. And it's like, and they just took over.
No,
that's where it's like they always played with it, but they were always able to kind of keep it off, kind of like the woman in the attic, the wife in the attic.
Oh my God, Jane Eyre. I think of Jane Eyre, it's like his wife from the Caribbean, which was always a woman of color. Were we the only ones who knew that? Like, okay, she was a woman of color. That's why you were hiding her. Racist Mr. Rochester.
Okay.
Okay, that's for another conversation.
Okay.
But you're, oh my God, but you're right. And the thing is, our older folks, like I think of Audre Lorde, I think of those folks, the activists from the early 80s. I think of second wave, Lord help them, but still, many of them, the Black feminists then, they knew, they said, you're playing with fire. And they said, watch out for these moral majority people, watch out. It was often queer people who said, and usually lesbians, because gay men were still like having fun and then with AIDS, but it was often lesbians of color who said, folks, watch out for this stuff because this is like, this is bad. This isn't like, don't roll your eyes at these people. Right. They're ridiculous, but they're gaining power and stuff like that. So lots of those. And again, of course, the people who are most marginalized are going to see with clarity, are going to see.
Because our very lives depend on it. Our survival depends on it. Yep. And I remember Faye, and I think we talked about her before, Faye Waddleton, who used to run Planned Parenthood.
Yes.
Wrote in her autobiography, she says, I tried to warn um, Eleanor Smeal and the feminist, because she said, my mama was a fundamentalist. She says, I understood how the moral majority worked and the religious right worked because my mama was one of them.
Yep.
And I understood that combination of God and that level of conservatism was not going to go well for us. And I tried to warn them, and they basically blew me off, is what she said.
Because white people never want to one, they don't want to listen to us, but because they think they know better.
They think they know better, and they want to believe in their own innocence. Like we could never do something like that because we're white people. We're innocents, right? And we're like, no, y'all are kind of a dangerous lot. And
thank you. They do not. I will never forget when a good friend, mentor of mine, gay black man, was talking. He was a social worker, and he was at a social work conference. It was like 1993, and he talked about how white people were taught to be afraid of black people. He's like, you focus on black crime and stuff. He said,
yes.
If history tells me anything, I should be much more afraid of you.
Listen.
He said, so, okay, you are going to love this. Because you'll see me. So Williamstown is a hot mess right now because Williamstown, so for folks who don't know, so I live next to where Williams College is. It's Williamstown. They call it the Village Beautiful. You can imagine it is a play. I love it. Yeah, the Village Beautiful. They pat themselves on the back for being white progressives. Well, they just had a
proud.
Yep, they just had because because they're located with the #1 liberal arts college in the country that has like a $4.5 billion endowment, and they just had a student say the N-word, in class, and a student confronted him and he cussed her out and kicked her out of class. So the school committee was voting on wants a DEI coordinator for the whole district, for the whole town and stuff like that, which actually will be
to be in charge
of course. But parents of color, many of whom are my friends, are really working on this and stuff like that, doing great work.
Good. So,
there is now, the anti-CRT people are coming out.
Of course.
And they're just like, so one person wrote, sent a letter about, literally, first of all, plagiarized. His racist hate can't even be original. So it was Thank a White Person Day. We should have a Thank a White Person Day. And it was all this total ahistorical BS.
Right.
It's the highest, black and brown people have, great incomes because of us. I mean, it's drivel.
Yes.
So, I was like, okay, I'll do a Thank a White Person Day. Thank you for colonialism. Thank you for my diabetes. Thank you for post-traumatic slave syndrome. Oh, I'll go there. You want me to thank a white person? Oh, I'll thank you.
Yeah, let's do this. Thank you, white lady, for lying about Emmett Till.
Ooh. Thank you.
Girl, thanks.
Thank you, Karen.
Thanks, girl. Smooches.
Yeah.
And thank you for raising your children to do the same damn thing.
Thank you. And I was just like, I just thought that, you know what?
Let's do this. Let's play.
But exactly, let's play. I mean, I think the thing is, for lots of us, my husband, so for those of you who don't know, I have, my husband's name is Frederick. He is an African-American man who was born in 1967 in Uniontown, Alabama. And I think for him, we talk about kind of this vitriol. And he said, he's like, obviously growing up in Alabama, there is this. He said, but I'll be honest, he goes, I just thought they were all going to die off. He said, I just thought they were all gonna that we were just gonna, it was like
he grew up all black. It's like they're just gonna die off.
It's like they're just gonna all die off, and it was like, and I said, it was, and he said, it's not like, he said, I knew it was there. I knew, he said, but the vitriol, he said, and we were talking, and I said, but in many ways, this vitriol, what we're seeing, are the last it actually shows that we've been successful.
It does, but I also think, and maybe this is me being like Gen X pessimistic, but it also shows the resiliency.
No, that's,
white supremacy.
I think that's where Frederick and I were like, we didn't.
This shit is resilient.
No, that's what it was. Like we knew that they were there, but it was like that, like that they could come together in that way, because usually they were so disparate and stuff like that, but they were able just to do it and to come together. I don't know that we were surprised, but it was. And I know what it is, and frankly, what it is, it's not that it's the far right, and actually, I still believe this. Right. It's not that and I think this is where the blame really lies, and people may not like that I say this, but I know that you're going to agree with me. The people who actually really let us down were good white people.
Isn't because that what the good King Jr. said?
Because the good white people because
they're the bystanders.
Because let's be honest, it was a minority movement at the beginning. Trump was like, oh, but the good white people didn't take him seriously. And they were like, oh, this can't happen. But they're the ones who kept putting him on TV. They're the ones who are like, oh, but they're getting things. They're the ones who. So for me, they actually made it bigger. They're the ones who actually made it bigger, because what that did was it connected to Joe Blow in Kokomo, Indiana, who's like, oh, he actually makes sense.
Yes.
That is what happened, is that we all knew that it was in the back of white people's mind. I think that's what Fred and I were saying. It's like, we knew it was there.
Yes.
But it was the good white people who allowed it to be activated.
Yes, it was latent.
Yes.
It was latent. And we thought that racial progress was, we had to fight for it, but we didn't have to think we had to fight for it on all fronts, because we believed that the civil rights movement did most of the legwork.
Yes.
And we still had to, we had our skirmishes along the way, but we didn't think that it was going to get to this point. And yes, I mean, that's where you get the whole conversation around check your privilege and all this. Because what we're saying to white people is, y'all have been bystanders long enough. And dare we say, as another person that we know would like to say, y'all allowed this conversation at your dinner tables. We talk about kitchen, what is called kitchen table issues.
Yep.
White supremacy is a kitchen table issue, because you teach your kids this stuff at the kitchen table. Y'all eat it up. You show it. And my ex-husband had to explain this to me, because I asked him, I said, how did you learn it? How did you learn this? He said, Andrea, it's not something that is explicitly said to us. We pick up the cues along the way, and that's how we learn it. So it's never ever stated per se, for the most part. But we just learn the
some people.
Some people, right? Because he was, was
it, if he was raised in a good white house, then right. Yeah, it would have been much more seamless. It would have been much quieter. I mean, I know people who, like where I grew up, there were white working class people who literally talked about those people, and and people would say stuff. So it was pretty, but that was the easy stuff to fight.
That was the easy stuff. This other latent, I was like, I can't fight your brain, but in the meantime, your brain is saying, and out of what's coming out of your brain is this whole other thing, and let us be honest. The white moderate, white liberal, white people who think that they're allies, but then they go to their jobs and become microaggressive with people of color, has been a problem for a while. Heck, Frederick Douglass talked about him in the 1800s. Martin Luther King talked about him in the 60s. White moderates are a problem, just as much as Donald Trump and his minions.
Yes, no. So, I mean, that is so true, because for me, it's when, and I think that's where, and I think Frederick almost viewed that as, said that as much. He goes, I think I expected more from the good white people.
We all did.
He said, I thought that the good white people would be like, oh my God. And he said, it's because, he said, I didn't grow up with, because also part of, and this is where he said, and actually, we actually had a great discussion about this. sis, is
and we are
that
so
because
aging.
I know, sorry folks,
That's
you know us. We're like, but you're gonna love this conversation.
Yes.
Is because he didn't grow up with white people. He didn't know that quiet stuff, and he was raised in Alabama. So for him, he said, I realized, like, when he grew up in Alabama, when white people were allies, they really were, because they paid a price.
Yes.
So for him, and then, you know, he went to the University of Michigan, and the University of Michigan, like, he had really strong white allies because he was doing really great justice work.
Right.
And then in Philadelphia, you know, he was part of a really racially just progressive UU church. So for him, he goes, I realized I was lucky with the white folks that I knew. He said, he said, so if you think, he said, until I was over 40, the white folks that I knew actually really did show up. And he goes, and I know most Black people don't have that experience at all. He goes, and I realized that was my career trajectory and stuff like that. And I said, you're right. I said, totally. I said, and he said, because of course, you know me, because especially because of how I look, I was much more cynical.
Right.
I was like, I don't trust what, no. Right. They a damn lie. They a damn lie. They, you know, and stuff like that. But I still kept thinking.
I think we kept hoping.
That's what it was. I kept hoping, and I know that I probably expected more from white women. Not too much, because I knew that white women still overwhelmingly voted Republican. They always did. Actually, you know, what's interesting, Ezra Klein taught me that actually fewer white women voted for Trump than they had in the past for any Republican. So actually, fewer of them did. I just don't think that many of us realize how many of them voted for Republicans.
Yes. And I also don't think we realize how integral they are to the perpetuation of white supremacy.
Oh,
yes. Because, especially because, you know, they want to talk about because they have a very mitigated privilege of being women. So they want to say we're all women, so we're all oppressed. And women of color been like, are you serious?
No.
You're a damn lie. It's what we just want to break down and say, because Black women specifically, we have a particular history with white women. Yeah. It's intimate, but we also understand that they can be vicious.
Oh.
They can use their femininity to be ugly. Again, thank you, white lady, for killing Emmett Till, getting Emmett Till killed. And that encapsulates all of that in a nutshell. But because we've also dealt with, you know, we're all dealing with sexism, and that whole rhetoric, let's say, because that's really what it was, and that rhetoric continues on when we say women and people of color, as if, you know, as if both these groups are oppressed the same way. It's like, no, we're talking white women and people of color.
Yes.
You know, but white women want to fight being called white women. We're just all women. I'm like, no, we're not just all women. We're not.
No.
And stop lying about that, because trust me, when it rubber hits the road, you're going to be white. You're going to be a white woman, and that's how you're going to function, especially at the expense of women of color.
Oh, I mean, it has been, and I love the number of books that have come out talking about, like, one of my favorite is the one, I mean, I shouldn't say my favorite, but it is an important one about white women in slavery times.
Yes, they were her property.
Yes, like, because, you know, of course, white women want to be like, well, we were just there, we couldn't help. No, you actually owned human beings. Like, George Washington's wife, Martha, actually came with human beings.
Yep. And to the marriage as like dowry. We were dowry.
And don't you think that, like, it also doesn't make sense, like, especially if your husband is raping women and having children, don't you think that that would be human? Of course you're going, because you want your white supremacy. You're not going to take it out on your husband. Who are you going to take it out on?
Right. And there it is. And been taking it out on us ever since.
That's
the thing. And even though we have overcame a lot of stuff, we're still dealing with the morphing of white supremacy again. And so it comes out in these whole other ways. So you can't beat me, but I'll make your life difficult at the job.
Oh, and that questioning that, there's a great book in academia called Presumed Incompetent.
Yes.
And it's about what women of color in the academy. And I can't tell you, especially Black women, are assumed to be incompetent, which is so wrong, because it's like, you and I know in order to get there, they have to be 3 times as good.
For half as much, for mediocrity. We have to be twice as good for mediocrity.
I will never forget when I was at Macalester and we were looking for a dean for faculty diversity and inclusion. And there was a Black woman who came and interviewed. She was a finalist. It ended up being a failed search, which of course I knew. There was a white man who was on the committee, faculty in biology. She had published something like 45 papers, 5 books. And he admitted, he said, oh, she would intimidate me. And I looked at her and I said, thank you for your honesty. Because usually white men and white people are not honest about that.
Yeah.
But thank you for your honesty, because that's what it's about. That is what it's about.
What are we intimidating about?
Exactly. Like, first of all, she's in communications, you're in biology. Like, okay. Like, why are you comparing?
Y'all will never meet unless y'all happen to be, crossing, the campus. So that doesn't matter. But again, it's this continuous reenactment of, I want to own you. I want to make you feel bad, but I want to have this whole other narrative of innocence and how you make me feel. It's like, it's not about you. It's like, if you want me on talent, but then you get mad at the talent, and then you want to say it intimidates you. It's this, like this one person that I know says, it's always this paradoxing that people of color have to deal with under white supremacy. That's why we age the way we do on the inside. Yeah. We might look cute on the outside, but trust me, we're probably twice as old on the inside, because we're always dealing with the psychological and physical results of this constant paradoxing of our reality.
Well, I think, so Andrew, one of the things that someone once said to me, and I think this is so true, I think part of what it is that when Black people are in spaces that they are not supposed to be in. Like, who are you? Like, you're not supposed, like, you were not, because remember, Blackness was meant to be servitude. So, and it was supposed to be less than, so it's like, so it's okay when Black people are janitors. It's okay when Black people are in their place. But if there is a Black person who makes me feel bad about myself because they are more talented than me, that's what it is. Because this person, because lots of
don't hire the person. I'm like, to me, this is really simple. Don't hire them. Hire everybody. I know you can't do that, even though y'all do it anyway. But my thing is, why subject that person? Because what also starts happening is you make the environment so toxic for the person that they'll leave anyway.
Well, that's what I do. So often places like that, like Macalester, will not hire that person.
Right.
But I'll tell you, having been that person in that position,
yes,
you feel like, you say you want me. I have everything that you have. You say you want.
So then what the fuck?
Exactly. So there's this, like, what was I not good? And it takes a lot to remind you, oh, this may have nothing to do with me. This probably has nothing to do. But they make it have to do with you. It does, because it takes up psychic energy in your, because you're just like, oh my God, and that's why when Nicole Hannah-Jones says, I don't want to be in this space, so many of us were like, yes, because we were taught, it's worth it to go through all of that stuff, what my colleague Catherine went through. And she was like, no, you go to a place where you're wanted. You go to a place where you are wanted.
Yep.
But for me as a chief diversity officer, when I have been in those places that have not supported that, I've said, I'm not going to recruit women of color because I'm not going to put them
in that position.
I'm not going to. And then people get mad at me. Well, that's your job. No, it's not. No. That's not my job, is to sustain. My job is to help you deal with your shit.
Right.
And I will help you deal with your shit, but you need to do that before I ever put
another person of color
through this.
Yeah. Yeah. I will be that safeguard.
Because no, you're not going to do that. Because you are not ready. You are not ready. Because you want to blame us, or you want to blame Andrea, or you want to blame this woman. No, it's not us. It's you.
It's you. And it'll continue to be you until you stop it being you. And that is your job as being a person who wants to be in this society of this democracy. Y'all keep hollering democracy. Democracy literally means one person, one vote. If everybody vote counts, then everybody who doesn't look like you has to count too. Or else what are you saying? Or are you just full of bullshit? I mean, and I think that's kind of where everybody is at. I think there's an impatience around white supremacy. It's like, either y'all gonna shit or you're gonna get off the pot. Figure it out.
Now you sound like my mother. You know, Peg used to say that all the time. Should I get off? Well, what it was is that, we've been now saying for almost 60 years. 60. You say you want to do this, we've been moving and stuff like that. And so now, but also I think that we're at the deep stuff. Like this is like the deep. So it's actually understandable where we're at, because I think in the 70s and the 80s, we thought, well, just add the numbers. And then the 90s. So I actually think that this is the justice work, because this is the cultural stuff that's really hard. But this is also where they'll try to do the gaslighting. Well, you can't prove it. You can't prove it. But we've become smart enough that, oh, yes, we can. We can prove it, because we can show patterns.
Yep.
We can show these things. So those people who want numbers, we can show it. And we can talk about people's lived experience. That's where social media is good, because I can see patterns and we can see things. So so while this is tiring, this actually is a wonderful moment, because these are the more difficult conversations. Because this is why, just adding and mixing isn't enough. Right. Because if the culture isn't, if the culture is still allowed to be white supremacist or just assimilationist,
right, then that's not working, because we've already seen the net results of that, and that's not good. So let's rethink this. If we still want to be a democracy, if we still want to value, and we still want to be multicultural, and we still want to have, I want to say that some of the things that was good that came out of this was, some people are like, no, I really truly like my Black neighbor. I truly do like my South Asian coworker. I like this world. I really truly do. And I'm saying this as a white person, and I want this to stay this way, because I like what folks add to my life, and I hope I add the same thing to theirs. That's what that's about. And I think that's where we're at, this difficult part where some white people are like, no, I really do kind of like my Black friends. I really, when I have my Black friends, we're, and it's not even me trying to take their culture and be appropriative. It's just like, no, I like my Black friends in my life. I like my Latinos in my world. I like this world, and I want this world, And so I think that's the deeper stuff. And those are the people who we call not allies, but we call those people, we say they cast their lot.
Fred loves that term.
I love it too. I think it's because I think it's such a deep activism. It's like, it's more than just, showing up with a sign. It's like, no, I will live with, and I will literally stand beside, because they are living next to me, and I know how they, I know how they keep their house. I know how they keep their kids. I see their dogs, all of that, and it's a very political idea.
Yes.
holding of living with someone. There's something very political around that, and not just the, you know, I have an interracial marriage because that just unto itself, that's a thing. It's like there has to be a little bit more conversation around that, because we've seen interracial relationships where it's just all kaput, and you're like, this is a hot mess.
This is a hot. So you know Fred tries to use that. You've cast your lot, so you should make me breakfast.
Fred, don't do that. Now, we got to keep you not ashy. That's the job.
I know. I do know that. You know, I am. Yes. Yes.
You put a ring on it. You put lotion on it. That's all I'm saying.
Exactly.
That's what you do. But no, not breaking breakfast. Fred, if you don't get your butt up and do your thing and feed yourself, listen.
Exactly.
But back to that idea of casting lot. That and I think that's what people of color, when we're talking about fighting white supremacy, that's what we're talking about. It's like, we want you to do more than just, you know, say the words and have the pretty mission statements and have your DEI working group. We're like, you need to literally stand with us and cast your lot with us. That's what we're talking about.
That's why, to me, Heather McGhee's The Sum of Us is so good.
Yes.
Because she shows racism actively hurts white people. Like, because white people will vote against things that actively will
destroy them.
There is no federal government social net because after the 60s. I mean, she shows that because white people said, oh, it's going to help black people.
Hell nah. Right. And so in the process, nobody has health care. But what had happened, let's talk about health care for a minute. What had happened was, because remember Hillary Rodham Clinton tried to get that, and everybody's like, girl, bye. But the idea was implanted. It was like someone says, it was lying on the street. So then what President Obama did, he's like, I'm going to fight for this, and y'all going to hate me, and you know, here comes the Tea Party, you know, came out of all that too. But what he said was, what he calculated was, if I get enough people on it and have them understand, and it's going to be messy. The whole rollout was messy, but if I get them on it and they can see for themselves that this is a good thing, then it will stick. That was his calculation, and by gosh, by gum, by golly, that's exactly what happened.
But still, But look at the South. But look at the places that fought against him. The white people, yeah, and but I think Heather got, the white left who were so mad at him, but they never want to have a race analysis. They didn't want to see how anti-blackness plays into that.
No.
Because it's giving something, because white people will vote against something if they think black people are getting something for nothing.
Or just getting something.
Getting something, exactly.
Even if it's for nothing, even if it was for something or for nothing, black people are getting it. That cannot happen because, again, back to the idea of black people, their function is service. And they should always want to just serve because that's...
And they're undeserving. And because... Let me tell you, as someone who is seen this way and has heard white people, that is what white people deeply believe. Black people are fundamentally undeserving because it's those deep white supremacist myths. Yes. Lazy, all those things. They want something for nothing, even though I'm like, lazy, why would you enslave a group that's lazy? Like, if you think every stereotype was based upon something that was not true, was the exact opposite.
It was the paradox.
And the black man being sexual, even though white men were raping black women. Like, it was so like
that's the paradoxing. That's the act of paradoxing. Yep. That's exactly what it does. So they and it's like and they're only deserving when they are servants. Beyond that role,
and they know their place. Because then they're deserving because of white people's largesse. Because white people gave them something.
Right. And so we always want to reenact
yes.
that sense of largesse. You should be grateful to me because it's like, I mean, it's like, no, I mean, I got the job. Thank you, affirmative action, but affirmative action allowed me to show my skill set. That's all affirmative action did. Because, and let's all be 100, white women, jump, and affirmative action proper, capital A, was the biggest beneficiary, like you were saying, it was white women. So let's not
the secondary benefits, because who were married to? White men. So white men have also benefited from it. So let's talk about that. But that's the thing about white people. White people deeply believe that, I mean, I read a really great piece about like black candidates in the GOP really having to walk that they can't seem too proud or too uppity.
And also they have to spew this mess with a smile on their face. I think that's what hurts my soul. When I look at Herschel Walker, I'm just like, that you are hurting my soul.
No.
You hurt, and I was watching, even with the late Colin Powell, when he had to get up in front of the UN and justify, I'm like, my soul hurt for him.
I still wonder what his private, because he was too much of a military man, he would not tell the truth. But I know, he was pissed.
He was pissed, but also he said later on, he said that was a black mark on my record. He regretted that ever since. I think to his dying day, he regretted that. He's like,
how could he not?
How could he not? But again, it's that you are deserving through our largesse, and when you don't act as if you deserve, you're not grateful for our largesse. It's a problem. Again, and that is white supremacy operates on certain principles, even though it morphs in different ways. It's like, it's a body. I might put on different clothes, but it's still a body that functions a certain way. That's what we need to understand white supremacy. It's living. It's like the people who are enacting it. It's a living creation, and it will. And until white people want to like be done with it all and realize it's making me sick, you sick, my kid's sick, your kid's sick, it will always live. That's where it goes. And so white people need to kill it.
I think that is the perfect place, because we have been on a roller coaster. We did not talk about ageism even one bit.
We will get to that. We will get to that.
But folks, just to remind you, this is why this podcast is so much fun, because you never know what you're going to get.
We might dress the same, look, and talk about something different.
But you're going to learn something.
That's it. From two people who have kind of been there and
have lots of opinions.
Yes.
But they're informed opinions.
Yes. And even when they're uninformed, they're fun.
Well, and also we admit, we're like, okay, I think I remember this. I'm not sure. Yeah. And we're also open to learning and be like, oh, I forgot about that. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. And sometimes we throw opinions out there. It's like, I just want to kind of throw this out and see if it is okay. It's not okay, but am I thinking about it? Maybe
exactly.
Not. So so we love y'all.
Yes.
This was an hour of us, because this is what we get when we don't see each other for a while. We just kind of go.
Yes.
We go. Yes. So with all of that, we love y'all. Thank you so much for enjoying us. And Aisha, the reason why I put that out there was because you love to show me these videos where people are doing things without sound, and it sounds ridiculous. So I had to do that back to you, girl. Love you. All right.
We will see you all soon.
All right. I'm Andrea, and this is my bro love,
Chris.
And we will talk to y'all soon. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.